Because you know it's 3 minutes after the hour, which is our normal delay period, and people will just catch up. So greetings, everybody. My name is Mike Atkin. I'm the managing director of the EDM Council. I'm very pleased to see so many people interested in this work. It has been gaining attention across the industry, across the regulatory community, and certainly the time is right for us to kind of take this thing to its next level. We have now completed and released to our membership what we call our core content model, and we'll get into some of these definitions in a moment. We have lots of members that are using it in various ways. Most of them are using it as a basis for self-assessment. We've been getting a lot of feedback on the models, mostly good feedback, but some very useful critiques that have allowed us to improve the model. We are now deep into the alignment process with Carnegie Mellon and trying to align the core content of the data management maturity model with the CMMI methodology, and we'll talk about that. And we are standing, in my opinion, at the a point of moving to the next phase. And that next phase is really the pathway toward a common certification model for the industry or for industries. And we are standing at that inflection point right now. We've divided this thing into 3 sections of 3 topics. I'm going to give you a brief overview and set the context of what's going on. Then we're going to talk about the alignment process and how we are doing that and where we are in that, including our time frames and deliverables and our expectations. And then we're going to have this open discussion with some of the invited participants about their experience in using the model. So let me introduce them. This is going to be an open discussion. Everybody is everybody is invited to participate as they see fit. I'm going to act as the host and master of ceremonies through the interview process. So I've invited Melanie Mecca. Melanie is from Booz Allen. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Booz Allen from the very beginning stepped up and recognized the potential of the DMM and its value to industries and the value of a maturity assessment model. Not only did they participate in the development, but they stepped up and helped with the funding process to get this collaboration with Carnegie Mellon underway and in earnest. And I just wanted to, Melanie, to thank you publicly for the contribution that Booz has made in support of the DMM and in putting your money where your mouth was and helping us move this to reality. We also have Jim Halcomb. Jim works for the council. This is his project. He's got his feet on the ground with the members on the DMM implementation and development. He's the one who owns this conversion process. He's going to join me in all of these conversations with his experience interacting with the industry. Also, we have Predrag Dizdarovic from Element 22, one of our core team members. You might, if you've been using the spreadsheet assessment methodology, that was developed by Predrag and donated to the council, to the members. So Predrag, if you're on the phone, I just wanted to thank you for that work and for the contribution. We have Jose Rivera from Thomson Reuters. Thomson has been helping a number of their clients with implementation. They also did a pretty deep internal self-assessment. He's going to talk a little bit about his experience. I have Dick Wilson and Sheila Jeffries from Bank of America. Not only are they looking at using it internally, but they did a very thorough and structured critique of it, one that we've been taking very seriously and trying to adopt into our model. The good news about this is, while there's been great, healthy critique, everybody's conclusion is the same. This is a solid piece of work, and they're all planning on using it. I've got John Yelly and Ron Jordan from DTCC. They're currently going through a self-assessment as we speak. We're going to talk about their experiences and the motivations behind and what they're learning. I have Jeff Gorball. I've just recently invited from Kingland. He was one of our core teams, been helping us with the alignment with the CMM methodology. And last but not least, of course, is John Weems from Carnegie Mellon. John has been a consistent participant in helping us understand the methodology that exists within CMMI and how we need to adopt it and modify it for the practice of data management. So with all of that, let me just kind of tell you what this thing is. So this activity is the result of a formal collaboration and now a partnership between the Council and Carnegie Mellon. We are taking the content that we've been developing with our membership and our industry. We're applying it to the precision of the CMMI assessment methodology. We've been modifying that methodology to fit the new dynamics. And at the end, what we're going to have is an assessment criteria, assessment model for all industries to use in evaluating both capability and maturity. And we'll get into that in a second. It's also a definition of the components of data management. So a lot of practitioners from a lot of different parts of the industry, from data, from applications, from executive management, etc., have been working with us continually, try to document these practices. Our orientation is to present this as a management view of the practice of data management. So as you see a lot of the conversations, keep in mind that we're looking at it from the oversight perspective and the strategy of data management, as well as the ins and outs of how you actually do it. It is a communication mechanism, and it is an educational mechanism. And in fact, much of the responses that we've gotten from the industry has been about the value of the alignment that was achieved once people look at this model and they see the complexity and scope and dynamics and dependencies associated with data management. And finally, it's intended as a formal operational route map for people to use in evaluating the state of their own programs as they look at what they are doing and what they need to do to move this down the road toward their objectives, whatever they might be. Let me give you a sense of the process that we went through to develop it. So this actually has been a long time activity that I've been involved with ever since I started with the Council in 2005. We've been documenting the practice of data management as the industry was learning it. And most of us know the practice of data management started off very immature, all of us making it up as we go. A lot of those early lessons were documented as case studies. In that process, the industry pointed out to me that what we looked like we were producing was the data management version of the CMMI, and they thought that was really important and encouraged us to formalize that. So I introduced myself to Carnegie Mellon SEI. They invited me out to meet with them. They were thinking about data as well. We invited them out to meet with our board. We had a formal memorandum of understanding starting in 2008 to explore the development. The next year, I released a study, a research report that I wrote called The Anatomy of Data Management. That became the baseline for the DMM. The next year, a lot of the big banks were interacting with the regulators in what I call the hated and feared matter requiring immediate attention report. A lot of those reports were about data processes. They were about data quality. They were about governance. Unfortunately, they carried little guidance on what they needed to see in terms of competency. And the SIFIs got together and said, we have an opportunity to craft this collaboratively with the regulators and with the industry to come up with a rigorous assessment process that matches what we actually do inside of our organizations. That was supported by a report that was issued by the Senior Banking Supervisors Group. That's a group of the central banks around the world who wrote a report that made the connection between risk management and data. And fundamentally, it said that we regulators are going to have to rely on lots of data produced by lots of organizations and aggregated up from lots of business units. That data needs to be consistent and comparable and trusted if we're going to use it for our macroeconomic analysis and our scenario modeling. We also further conclude that if you financial institutions do not have control over your data processes and alignment amongst your data, we're not sure that you have control over your risk processes. And it laid down a gauntlet, if you will, that data and data management capability was a critical component of operational risk. In December of that year, we based on all that conversation, we organized a core team of about 15 or 20 people that were meeting with us regularly to develop this activity. That took off and wound up being a 3-day-a-week conversation to produce that core model. That core model then resulted in a formal partnership with Carnegie Mellon and our agreement to align the DMM with the CMMI methodology. In May of this year, we released that core model to our membership, became the baseline for self-assessment. Starting in September, we've been developing a hybrid methodology, taking the best of CMMI and applying it not to software or product development, but to data management approaches. And we're going to explain what that hybrid model is and how we are developing it. And now we're in the process of doing daily sessions to take the core content that exists, the feedback that we're getting from the industry in its use, and apply that to create what I'm going to call the DMMI, which will be the assessment-capable component of the data management maturity activity. To put that into context, it's actually fairly straightforward for those of you that know CMMI. We followed that methodology. We have a top-level activity divided up into core category. There are 4 of them. I'll get into that in a second. Each of those then have multiple components. Those components have lots and lots of process areas under them. Those process areas are divided up and aligned with management goals, with core questions that you need to ask yourself about these process areas, and with the description now of what ideal objectives are in each of those process areas so that you can measure yourself both from a capability assessment and from a maturity assessment. So our maturity assessments follow the CMMI generally. We have the first level, which is really project-based, ad hoc type of activities. Second level, which is line of business-based. Third level, which is enterprise-wide and fully competent in the practices. And then level 4 is that enterprise-wide, then measured and traceable with dependencies aligned across the organization. And of course, at the top of the house is how you embed this into your culture on a continually improvement, innovation-based approach. All of this stuff is designed to be interconnected. The interconnections with them are also being documented as part of the model. And we are leveraging the best of the, what I call the CMMI constellation of activities. So what Carnegie Mellon and CMMI have learned about their processes, they've reduced to some standard support process mechanisms, which we are referencing as part of the model so that they all work consistently together. This is the table of contents. I'm going to leave it up here. This is the categories, the components, and then the processes that we are currently working on. There is some modification going on in that activity, and we'll refine this, depending upon the outcome of those conversations. So with that is the background. Let's talk a little bit about the process that we went through to get to where we are now. So John, let me start with you, and can you kind of put briefly into context the CMMI process, including certification, and then how that relates to the DMM objectives?
Certainly, Mike. Thank you so much. For those of you that aren't familiar with CMMI and the CMMI models, they're a collection of best practices that help organizations to dramatically improve their effectiveness, their efficiency, their quality in specific domains that are addressed by the different models. And so what we do is we do bring a process focus to these areas and look at gaining some of the efficiencies and effectiveness that the total quality programs around the world have brought to other domains, and we want to bring that now to the data management domain. So with what you see on the screen there, the Enterprise Data Management Council has done a wonderful job of identifying areas that are important to data management and lead to quality in data management. And what we're going to do with the CMMI model is to, number one, bring that focus of improvement to these areas. Take a look at how we can look at what's going on in an organization against what these best practices are in data management, provide an appraisal methodology to do that, and to give the organization then an idea of where their strengths and their weaknesses are in these areas, and to begin building a roadmap for improvement in data management.
So John and Jim, we actually had to modify the CMMI processes that were developed over the last 20 or so years, and we created, I guess, what we call our hybrid model. So could you take a moment, maybe Jim, let me start with you, and kind of give us a flavor of what came out of that discussion, and what do we mean by a hybrid model?
Sure. So for those who are maybe unfamiliar with CMMI, the most recent version has certain practices that are applied over and over again for the entire model, and that determines what level of maturity or what level of capability you score for a given area. And we had some of those ideas in the core content model, and then we had new ideas as well. So an example of that would be we had concepts like organizational scope, where from a management perspective, we're concerned about at what level of the organization you're consistently applying data management principles all the way up through the enterprise-wide level. And that was while not completely different from what CMMI has, it was addressing in an organizational perspective that was really kind of new, and so we've retained that in this hybrid model. And we've also, in the original core content model, had this idea of increasing levels of competency within given process areas, and showing those as kind of climbing the ladder, if you will, as you go up the levels of getting more and more sophisticated in how you do certain activities that we've defined in data management. So we had, when we took a step back and we looked at how to integrate what we had in the core content model with what was in CMMI, we saw there were similarities, we saw there were differences, and we just couldn't make everything fit into the CMMI structure without losing some of that new stuff that we had that was particularly important to data management. And so the hybrid model has the gradations of levels still within the final document. You'll see statements for level 1, for level 2, and so on through level 5. But we've modified those statements to take some lessons from CMMI and kind of make them more ideal in their orientation, ideal statements of practice, rather than just I do data profiling on a project and then I do it at a business. And we got a little bit deeper in our analysis of what it meant to be doing data management at a particular process area, and we cross-referenced all of the concepts that we already had established in the core content model with those concepts that were consistent in the CMMI. So we literally put in brackets within a statement a reference to the parts of the CMMI that we're elaborating on, if you will, for lack of a better word, and that's actually a word that they use in CMMI, where you have something special to say about one of their generic practices, like I have organizational policies for doing data profiling, and so we do have those already established. Well, we'll reference, well, that's also mentioned in CMMI, and when we talk about that's CMMI's level 2 generic practice 1. So we provide for CMMI users the references back to the CMMI model, but the actual structure still retains the levels that you can see, the gradations of organizational scope and competency and sophistication that we have in the core content model.
So, Jim, in many ways, we kind of adopted this management orientation, that perspective of management, and those are reflected in the development of those ideal, or what I think we're now calling functional practice statements, because
yes,
you really do want to get a sense of what is this process area, what is the outcome, and why is it important, and that became kind of a core driver as part of our, let's call them, spirited discussions in developing this hybrid approach.
Yeah, well, and that's, you bring up a good point, because one of the things that the CMMI architecture allowed us as a team devoted to improving the content of this model, and it was a tool for identifying things that were just kind of formulaic. It's not they weren't important statements, it's just they weren't giving the user enough information to know what it means to be doing what we're talking about. And so it really helped us to focus on beefing up the model where it needed to be beefed up, rather than taking things out, because for the most part, what was in there was valid. We just needed to add some more stuff.
And in fact, I think we're finding that we missed some stuff. And as we go through this ideal development process, we find out that we have some gaps, and those gaps need to be filled.
Yes, and that's where a lot of the work has been applied.
So John, in many ways, we all agreed up front that we wanted to avoid some of the pitfalls that occur with CMMI, like the race to the rating, or to view the CMMI as a checklist rather than as a set of objectives. How do we manage that problem, and how are we going to avoid stepping into those holes with the DMM?
I think the first and best way is to make sure that whatever you're doing with the DMM, just as whatever you're doing with CMMI, is tied and aligned with whatever the business strategy is for the organization, to make sure that the practices that you implement within these process areas support the business strategy. And that business strategy is looking to improve the business, to get some type of return on investment for these quality processes moving forward. And so I think that's the first and major step there, is to focus on the process improvement towards a business end.
So I think it's worth emphasizing that, because our continual objective is to make sure that the DMM is aligned with the real world and not prescriptive, right? This is not a cookie cutter kind of application, because you're really aligning with your business goals and your strategy and your own organizational objectives, and getting that concept understood is not simple.
Hey, Mike.
Agreed. Absolutely right. Agreed. And some of the tailoring that we've done with regard to that in the data management area that doesn't necessarily show up in CMMI is, for instance, this focus on lines of business at level 2, at the level 2 practices. Not something that we necessarily focus on in CMMI. But coming to the data management community, especially within the financial community and the data management community, we realize the importance of differences or tailoring that has to be done at the line of business before you even think about enterprise-wide kinds of activities as well, because of different regulatory requirements or different business strategies or different business requirements that occur there. So that's another big way that we've looked to tailor the CMMI methodology for DMM.
Ron, you had a point on this?
Yeah, Mike. Sorry, can you hear me? I'm getting some feedback. Okay.
Yeah, if you could click on telephone as opposed to VoIP, your echoes should go away.
Yeah, I'm on a phone and not on the web, so hopefully this helps. Hold on a second.
A bit of echo. Carol, if you're on there and you can wave your magic wand and help him, that would be good.
Is this better?
I think maybe.
I think so. Go ahead.
Okay. If this is better,
yeah,
it sounds better
Ron.
now.
We'll deal with it. Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, so sorry, I've had some firewall problems, so I was a little late. I just want to emphasize what was just said, because I think to me that has been our experience the most important issue that I had to deal with at DTCC. DTCC, obviously, as a utility, is very process-focused and oriented, so it's heavily into CMMI. But when it came to data management, there was not much known about what data management was. A lot of people were doing it, but they didn't really understand what they were doing. Yeah. And the very first and most important aspect of the DMM is this governance piece, and it is the business, aligning the business with what it is that people are doing, getting them to understand that what they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis is data management, not operations, not related to other traditional software development and operations that they were used to. And it really did help set the stage where we, as a company, on an enterprise-wide basis, could have a discussion about what data management is, what we need to do as an enterprise to move forward, and then from there go through all of the technical capabilities and the operating capabilities around the DMM model, which then helps measure our success to do that. But none of that could be done until we got the buy-in that this was aligned with what the business needed and was strategically important for the firm. So the first piece that we took out of the model was the governance piece and all of the things related around governance and tying it to business.
And it's not just governance, it's also being able to understand the scope of the activities and how what you do affects those downstream, and kind of an understanding of the importance of some of these underlying data management practices.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I use governance probably very broadly, but it's really just how we're looking at the data, what the inputs, the outputs are, the effect, and just getting people to realize that much of what they do on a day-to-day basis is data management, and it does have impacts for the firm. And unless you look at it in that way, it's really hard to understand. And it's also then really hard to measure if you're doing better or doing worse than.
So, Ron, if you have an opportunity to dial in on a different phone, that would be helpful because you are echoing. I do intend to have a conversation with you on the next section. So, if that's at all possible, I think that would be useful. Even a cell phone, I think, would work because we are getting a lot of feedback on you. Maybe John and Jim, can you put this thing into context for us? Where are we in this process, and what do we expect to have delivered and by when, and kind of set some expectations, please.
Sure. Well, I'll take the first part of that, John. So Microsoft, who's one of the sponsors of the activity, has asked to be the first pilot, and so they've requested that, and by the way, let me just take a step back. So the way that we're doing this alignment and development process with CMMI is the whole idea is to, once we've kind of rewritten the content to the new format, the hybrid format, and come up with the assessment methodology that's going to support it, the idea is to take it and test it in actual organizations, and in order to determine what works and what doesn't work, et cetera. So that's the basic mindset behind what we're doing. And we have borrowed from CMMI's past in taking this in chunks. So the chunk that we carved out of the DMM for the first pilot is, and it was at the request of Microsoft, who is our first pilot organization, was to do the whole process area of data quality, or category of data quality, which is 6 process areas. And in addition to that, to carve out the goals component of data management strategy. So as you're looking, I think everybody has the slide with the different parts of the model. You can see goals is the first component on this chart, and that comprises objectives, priorities, scope of data management program, and then the 6 process areas are in the rightmost column by data quality. So that's the scope of the first pilot. We're making good progress down that path, and our goal is to conduct the first pilot in mid-January in Redmond. So that's the short term that we're preparing for. We've divided the work up into 5, I think, work streams. Is that right, John? I have hard time keeping track since I sit on all of them.
Yeah, the 5 work streams.
Well, there's
right
only
now.
5 days, and you're on it daily, Jim. So I think that's 5.
So we have 5. We've divided it up into 5 groups, and we're collectively working to get the pilot ready, and then we'll pilot about 4 or 5 times. So we have 4 categories, and we're starting off with 1 category, data quality, plus a little bit of strategy since it's so huge. So that's, and the plan is to finish that piloting and rewriting activity and getting the certification process in place by the end of 2013.
So John, what is the point of a pilot? What are we trying to learn from that? Why do we do these things?
A couple of things that we want to learn from a pilot. Number one is, as we look at the model, as we look at what's happening in an organization, does the model reflect a reality of what's happening in organizations? Is what we describe in the model something that actually happens or would happen in an organization? Because sometimes we're trying to stretch these practices to get an organization to kind of stretch a little bit in terms of their quality and effectiveness and reliability there as well. And so we want to make sure that that is happening. Second is, how well does the model provide a roadmap for these types of activities as well? So is this truly helpful for an organization to look at this model and say, okay, yes, I see where improvement is needed, I see where my strengths are, I see where my weaknesses are, and I see where I need to start work. And that roadmap is you have to keep in mind that in many cases these process areas, these categories build on each other or work with one another, and so we want to make sure those connections are correct as well.
So John, just a final point here. Tell us what certification means and how that process works and what kind of tools might be available as part of that activity.
Oh, absolutely. So as part of the full product suite, as we'll call it, that we're going to deliver to the community, that includes the model itself. So that's what we're building right now. It includes the training courses that organizations will need to learn about the model, to learn how to implement the model, to learn how to go about process improvement. It will also include the methodology for doing appraisals, and we have a methodology that we use with other CMMI products, and we found that over the past 25 years that's actually done a very good job in appraising and assessing where organizations are against model-based improvement activities. And then finally, we're putting together some certifications related to the certifications we have for CMMI. Certification means that an individual has shown competency in using the model, in applying the model, in consulting against the model, and they've shown that through both book knowledge and practice in the field in doing that. And certifications that we'll offer include being a certified instructor, being a certified appraiser, and also being a certified what we call data management process improvement professional, and that is providing the consulting and other activities that go there. But why is certification important for the community? Well, a big part of the success of a model is that we get the right information out there, and that the information meets kind of the criteria of what is good practice for the community. And so it allows an individual to show the talent, the skills, the knowledge they have, and have this certification to let others know that they are proficient in these areas as well. The certification also can work for the appraisal side of an organization. So if an organization is appraised and certified at a maturity level, then they can that signals something to others that are important to the organization, that they have things in place that make them a quality organization with regard to data management.
Carol, Pete Rivette had a question. He sent me an email. Can you release his line and see if you can allow him to ask his question?
Absolutely. Pete, can you hear us?
Hello, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah,
perfect. There you are.
Earlier the question was raised about matching the DMM to business processes. Yeah. And my question is, to what extent maturity model, which is being standardized by OMG?
And I'm sorry, what model is being standardized by OMG?
Business process maturity model, which again is a CMMI-based model for business processes.
So John, have you had any experience of how CMMI relates to other models out there, and how companies can then align various approaches toward their strategy?
Yes, so we've had other collaborations such as this one with the Enterprise Data Management Council that have resulted in other types of models, in some cases a CMMI-like type of model as well. So there are other models that are out there related to CMMI, and one of the things that we look for when we develop these is for interconnectedness amongst the models, and the ability then to work two or more models together, and not necessarily increase the work by double or triple, but to look for synergies between process areas, so that as you work a process area in one model, it helps to accomplish a similar process area in another model. And we're achieving some of that in the data management model as well, in that some of the data strategy and governance things we've addressed in some of our other models.
And in fact, the objective is not to support models, but to be able to do the area correctly. And if you can do the area correctly and be assessed as being, valid in what you're doing, it should be consistent with any model, I would think. But that's just, just my shoot from the hip opinion.
Understood.
Let me turn to kind of the reality of the DMM in practice. And Melanie, I'm going to pick on you first, if I could, because you've done quite a few self-assessments with some of your clients. What was going on in the background of these organizations that led them to want to do this kind of assessment?
Well, our primary client at our first client, the Securities and Exchange Commission, was the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Data Officer. And at the Office of Financial Research, the primary client was the Chief Technology Officer. So they had different purposes. The first organization, of course, has been in existence a long, long time, and they know, and they'll tell anybody, that a lot of their data is fragmented and kind of scattered, and they don't have, they have a lot of siloed pieces in the organization, the attorneys, the examiners, and so on. So they are very conscious of a need to do data sharing and also improve the data quality across the organization. So that was their primary objective. And they also wanted to ensure that there would be a great deal of business involvement. So the approach that we developed was essentially a workshop-based approach, which brought lines of business, IT, the Chief Data Officer, and that organization together based on the model framework to fully assess all of the process areas, to get a snapshot of where they were currently. And at the same time, I think that since it's a great opportunity when you get people together in a collaborative manner, to also surface the lines of business and IT's greatest concerns, their greatest strengths, their greatest programs.
Well, let me hold that, Melanie, because I want to have a whole conversation on the process that's used and the process that other people were using. So if I hear you correctly, however, there was a recognition of a problem, and there was a recognition of the importance of data in that problem that led them to seek to improve their activities. So, Jose, if you're on the line, is that similar to what you saw within your own organization and then those of your clients?
Okay. I mean, from Thomson Reuters perspective, data is our asset, so that, we recognize asset to begin with. But more importantly, I think what we wanted to do is really, use the DMM framework to align our data management initiative and improvements, with the DMM capability. So we kind of, put it in a different way. Again, the data management, that's what we do every day, but we wanted to use an industry standard, and the DMM was actually then the opportunity that we use. And also, it gave us an opportunity to actually test the model. Does it make sense? We mentioned business reality. And for that, we actually were able to improve the model. We did this in partnership with Element 22. And we also, now conducting, self-assessment for our clients, continuing partnership with Element 22.
Ron or John, if you're back on the line, it was a little bit of a different story within the depository, right? You recognized that there were some changes going on in the industry and a need for the DTCC to step up to the reality of the new industry. How did that affect your approach, and why did you decide to go this way?
Mike, is this better? No echo?
Yeah, so far, yeah.
Okay. While it was a little different, it's very similar to the stories that you just heard. DTCC, like many companies, has evolved through a series of mergers over the years, and the mergers are in many cases integrated to various extents, and a lot of times it's a lot of the master data and the core data that tends to be the last that gets integrated. So from a DTCC standpoint, there were a couple of driving forces. One was, how could we better leverage the asset value of the information that we have, both for internal business intelligence reasons and for providing back to our participants who really were hungry for information. So how could we do that the most efficiently? And also, how could we drive out costs from the operating side? There's the cost of having multiple operations and not really being able to control your data in the way that you want. But then there's also the cost of bad data. And we all know that the costs of bad data dwarf in many cases, any inefficiencies in operating procedures. So quality data is extremely important. This DMM model really helped us apply some science to improve data quality, to improve data efficiency, and to leverage the asset value of our information.
So I'm assuming that I don't know if you're on the line yet. That cost containment, capability enhancement, and dealing with new requirements in the industry are the same drivers that pushed you toward a data management evaluation?
Yes, those. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are big concerns that have developed since the financial crisis. We began focusing on the capability, the framework, and maturity models around 2006 or 7, in large part because our history at Bank of America had involved growth by an incredible amount of acquisition. So we had an extremely complex information and technology environment, and trying to get a handle on that, simplify our processes, our data, and develop some sense of what was going on was critical at that point. The input of regulatory concerns has been a very strong motivator in developing our abilities, actually faster than I thought was going to happen.
Nothing like a little bit of motivation, eh?
Yeah.
Let me turn this conversation back to the process that firms are going through in using the DMM to meet these objectives of integration, cost containment, capability enhancement, regulatory response, etc. Melanie, you started to talk a little bit about a workshop strategy. Can you elaborate on what that is and how that worked?
Yes, I mean, because in the overall IT industry the past 30 years, mostly we have not considered enterprise data management holistically. There are organizational exceptions to that, but in general, most organizations have not kind of looked at it from the grand design approach. So with the nuts and bolts and detail in the data management maturity model, as well as its broad encompassing number of topics, in many cases this will be an unparalleled opportunity for stakeholders in the organization to look at it together, which is why we like the workshop approach, because it establishes common terminology, a common mind map, and a very collaborative manner in approaching how are we doing right now. And we found that to be very successful. Both of the primary clients were concerned, and when I present this to prospective clients, the concern everyone has is if you get everyone in the same room, they will fight. And we have not found that to be the case at all, because there is the framework to consider. Everybody comes up with examples from their area, and as a process of doing this, you surface all of your good work in progress, all of your strengths, as well as people's biggest pain points. So it turns out to be extremely useful, integrating, and valuable for the participants as well.
John, did you use a workshop strategy within DTCC, or did you do something else?
We're using the workshop approach as well.
No, I was talking to, I'm sorry, Ron. Excuse me, John.
Well, this is John from DTCC.
Oh, yeah, that's John Yell.
Excellent. I can't go wrong. I like that. That's nice. I'm sorry. So, yeah, John Yell, you used a workshop strategy as well, and can you describe that a little bit? How does it work?
Yeah, well, we're actually in the midst of it, and I'd echo what Melanie said. It works very well. You're a bit worried about the agendas people may bring to the sessions, but for the most part, it's a very honest discussion. Because people do realize that there's a lot of shared pain in this space, and it's beyond that, there's a big plus because out of the discussion it increases awareness, and in going into the workshops. One thing I would say is that I was trying to sort of focus it on the folks that had the right knowledge to make sure we had the right contribution to the assessment. But what ended up happening was we ended up bringing some additional people in who were newer to the organization, and that actually worked out well. because in some cases you'd have the folks who are newer who could then point to the people who say, well, this really isn't a problem, and they had a perspective that you made it apparent, well, you need to think about it this way, and encouraged some very productive discussion.
In fact, Jim, you described to me some of the observations that you made in being able to gain alignment between people that really hadn't been aligned for any other reason, from their job. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on what you learned?
Guys, if we could also, Christina Wong has a question when we're ready for that.
Yeah, I'll just answer
Hi,
your
so
question.
it's actually Avi from SN.
Well, I'm sorry. Let's go Jim, and then we'll go Christina. Go ahead, Jim.
Sure. I thought it was great. It was, John, just as a reminder, it was at one of those strategy sessions, and I'm just noticing that there were people in the room who were trying to answer the questions to the model, but then all of a sudden they're making connections between each other that were completely new. They knew each other, but all of a sudden they realized how they impacted each other from a data perspective. And in some cases, people were setting up meetings on their BlackBerries with each other that they had met in this meeting, and so that was very positive in my perception of how this was beginning to facilitate a broader perspective within the DTCC. Another thing that came up, and this was in a separate session, but one of the people said, have you ever heard that story about the 5 blind people in a room, and there's and they're feeling different parts of the elephant, and they're describing what, and I said, yeah, of course, yeah. Like, well, I'm having that experience right now. This is what's happening is that I didn't know that I had a significant role to play in how data is managed in this organization, and I'm beginning to become aware of that. So there was that awareness and how that was taking shape was very positive, I think, for everybody involved, and it was very nice to see. And so those are a couple that stand out in particular.
Well, let me just follow up on that, and then we'll get to Christina, because Melanie and Ron, both of you have described to me the educational value of the process that you went through, kind of being a really unexpected and good benefit. So can you maybe elaborate a little bit on what your experience was?
What we found is that the educational value and the coming together with the common terminology and a shared vision, as well as being able to, as Jim just talked about, being able to immediately tactically share some great things that may be done by line of business, or by program here or there, is as valuable as the content itself, in that it galvanizes everyone and brings them together, where when you come back with the organization's plan for how to implement this, both to realize strategic objectives as well as to address gaps, you don't get a lot of fighting. So it also prepares for your funding and your business case to do these initiatives for implementation.
Yeah, and let me add to that, Mike. This is Ron. Yeah, I'll add to that absolutely agree 100% with that, and I'll also add that in these educational sessions, what you realize is that a lot of the people in the room don't understand what the other people actually do and are doing with the data and how it's interconnected, how, what the inputs and the outputs really are. And it's almost like a central function in the human body. You have the circulatory system and the nervous system. Well, data has become one of those systems in an organization, and it's vital. And every action usually has a reaction. And so what you learn when you sit around these rooms is that people really don't understand what other people in the organization are doing and how that may affect them, and how what they are doing may affect other people.
Yeah. Okay, so Kyle, you said that Christina had a question. Yeah, that was nice.
There is terrible background noise, Christina. She is on voice over IP, and it really is causing a lot of problem. Christina, can you remove any other additional microphones and I will release your line again. Christina, can you try now?
No, we're dialed in on a
Perfect.
We're dialed in on a phone, and
not going to work. Sorry.
Try.
Ideally, you need to be on a telephone if you want to interact. Unfortunately, that's the limitation that we have with this activity.
Can I very briefly just suggest, your line says you're connected via voice over IP, so can you just very quickly go to audio, change your audio setting to say you're on the phone, and then insert the PIN number. Then we'll be able to pick you up and release your line over the phone.
While she's doing that, Ron and Melanie, Predrag, if you're on the phone, what's the right level of people that were engaged in these conversations? And how did you do the right mixture of folks?
I would say.
Why don't you
go
start?
ahead, Predrag.
No, go, Melanie.
Predrag, we haven't heard your voice yet. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, I would say it's really not one answer to the question. It's really, I would say, at least two answers, because it's a different areas of the data management program that we are really addressing, and they need really different level of the audience. So I would say that on the strategy side, our experience is that the more managerial and executive people you can bring into the room normally with the people that work with them, that would be a better approach in that case. They are engaging in the conversation. They, provide all of the things related really to the strategic aspects of the data management. And then they are extremely, as you would expect, involved in the discussion around the governance, organization, funding, and so on. It is a great experience, Melanie, to your point, going back to also provide them back with the information from the data management maturity model on how the things could be and should be done. So they have that educational, benefit out of it as well.
So there was actual cognition that came around with that educational background. So they walked away, Predrag, getting the joke about data management in a deeper way. Is that reasonable?
That is reasonable. And we had very interesting conversation a few weeks back in Canada on one of the assessments where the conversation went even to the core, like why we should really consider data as an asset, and if we do, what makes it, different, and what are the type of the managerial, mechanisms that we would have to apply, which would be different than applying to the other assets within the firm. Yeah. And then the whole conversation, why the IT should be separated from the data. I mean, the real things, in a way. So it was very, very interesting to see that type of the engagement from the executives within that firm. Now,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes. On the other side, when we go into the other categories, the category of the operations, the category of the technology, and the category of the data quality, there I would say it's really more contained within those areas. We tend, and we have been successful to bring into those sessions also the people from the other areas that are and should be involved, like business people into the IT session and into the ops and into the quality. But the main group there would be really, from those particular areas, because in many organizations, as you would expect, they do have those already as a shared services within the firm. But there, it's not really executive level, is really where I'm leading to. And what we had so far was usually we would have the top executive within that area, ops or the technology, present. On the data quality side, it's a challenge. The firms usually do not have separate data quality department, mostly. I mean, some do, but not many of them. So usually, what we have done and we found successful is that we then mostly lean on the risk side. The risk group usually has done the most of the data quality work within the firms, and then they are really the foundation, Mike.
So, Melanie, would you agree that there's a balancing act, and how does that translate into recruitment? And did you have to drag these people kicking and screaming, or do they come willingly?
Well, I would say the core critical set for most of this would be the line of business data stewards if they already exist, or the future line of business data stewards if they do not yet exist, because they will bring the perspectives of the multiple applications in which their data domain is instantiated, and they will give a lot of hard knowledge about the state of the data from the business side. And I agree with Predrag that for the more technical process areas, it's very helpful to have more IT representation, because they have to carry it out. And I'm just going to go ahead and say one more thing, which is that it is a strong principle of the data management maturity model that in terms of its grounding in the corporate culture, many of these processes need to be thoroughly integrated with best practices in software development across the entire life cycle. Data quality is a major case in point there. So as the organization matures, both the business owners and domain owners and stewards need to be collaborating very well with the IT life cycle to ensure, because that's where the rubber meets the road.
So, Carol, are we clear on questions? Christina, is she back on telephone? You want to give her a try?
I think this is Scott. I think we have Brendan Clark
Yes.
at the moment.
No, well, Brendan, you're up.
We also have Christina Wong, but Christina, we're still not picking up your audio.
Okay, so we're going to have to apologize for that, and we'll just move on. So, Dick, let me go back to you, and I want to change this conversation around a little bit, because frankly, there is some critiques of the DMM, and I thought you did a very nice job of identifying some. Can you kind of put that into context for us? What did you find was lacking or needs to be modified with the current model, and what should people look out for as they're thinking about using this?
Well, I don't want to be too critical right offhand. We started looking at the model because we saw that there was considerable value to it, and particularly because it emphasized areas that our own internal model had not focused on a lot. I think what we've seen is that there are very complementary. We emphasized a great deal the operational aspects of data management and tried to establish clarity and strategies on areas like metadata management, controlled data movement, data provisioning, and things like that. We did not emphasize in our framework and maturity model the program aspects, like the funding model, governance, structure and functions, and the data management strategy as sort of a public artifact.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
So I think what we've seen is that the most benefit we find from the DMM model is the clarity it brings to discussions about governance, about the program oversight, the development of culture in the corporation. The areas where we think would really benefit from a lot more clarity are things like the operational aspects. I think, for example, the meeting yesterday about metadata management. That was never identified in the current model as being a critical data management process area, but we consider it as pretty much the fundamental basis of being able to do any kind of real governance. So,
well, it's because I happen to loathe the word metadata, so I use data definitions, but
yeah. Yeah.
But I agree with you. What you're saying is there's some practical reality that needs to be infused into the model to really make it hum in practice.
Yeah, and I think that all those elements are there. They're just hidden in the discussion about the governance and program aspects. So focus on standards for service level agreements between data providers and consumers, getting business and technical metadata right, being able to develop and deliver metrics for governance. All of those things have a very strong operational aspect to them and need a strategy defined in concert between business and technology.
So that kind of throws the ball back into your court, Mr. Halcomb, because what we have to do, I guess we have to recognize that we developed this model kind of as a bunch of independent processes and then tried to link them up so they were kind of done in isolation, a little bit of redundancy slipped in, the operational links need to be made, and the dependencies between processes need to be made. How is that playing out in the alignment with the CMMI process?
A couple. So yeah, obviously the metadata is a big one, and we're addressing it for the next version, but it will not make its way into the DMMI version 1.0. But that's definitely something that we're addressing. But what we are addressing right now are the interdependencies that exist, and the basic philosophy that we have adopted in doing this is we want to maintain within the model the opportunity for an organization to come into the document sideways, so to speak, so that you can pick a particular category, component, or process area as something to single out because you prioritized it, and to be able to achieve a targeted capability level within that area without necessarily having to do everything in the model. So because the model is not meant to be, as you pointed out, we're not putting this model out there as something that people just adhere to the model. It's there as an improvement mechanism. So how we end up doing that is that we don't want to make strict requirements within the model for you to do things in other areas, but the fact is that there are certain things that you need to do, like in governance, that apply to data quality that you really should do. So we will try to be as precise as we can about what we expect without just using labels like governance. Involve your stakeholders, establish your policies, know your data lineage wherever it might necessarily apply, and then there's a section in the new format called related process areas, and it's in that section that it will be a helpful guide to the user that if you want to know the other process areas within the DMM and within the CMMI that we're referencing, we'll provide more helpful information about how, if you want to, you can go to data governance and really kind of go after the capabilities that we've already defined that relate to this particular practice. So the cross-reference capability is there as a useful guide, but it's not going to make you have to do the entire model just to get a level 3 in data quality, for example. One more thing I want to bring up, Mike, is metadata ain't the only area that we're missing, and we're learning a lot. And we're learning we have a good model, but we're also learning that there are things that we haven't hit upon quite as well as users would like. Another one of those is supplying data, outbound data management, if you will. We do a good job within the model of covering how you source your data, how you integrate it into your system, how you manage the quality around that, your SLAs and so forth, but we don't have the interoperability component, if you will, that ties the outbound with the inbound and how you manage that. So I'm very interested in getting more and more input from people about what's missing that we need to be thinking about in our working group activities that would be not part of what we're doing with CMMI directly right now, but part of making the next version of the model more relevant and more useful.
Well, it is part of what the council does, and I wanted to reemphasize that, Jim, because this is a collaborative model. We are building it based on the experience of the industry, and we want to incorporate the things that we're learning from the industry into the model itself, right? There's a continual improvement process for us that will be reflected in a release schedule associated with a DMM. So part of that operational review activity might fall outside of the purview of the DMM, but it does fall into the purview of the research agenda and the discussion activities going on within the EDM Council, and that's also part of your process, right? So you're going to try to bridge that gap between the DMM version and what we're learning about it from the reality of interacting with the industry.
Yeah, there are 4 areas I've identified so far, or that we've identified: metadata, interoperability, the 2 that I just mentioned, but also data or information security comes up all the time, and then another, it's doing a better job with data integration within the model. I mean, we speak to the quality of integration and we speak to the application integration, but I think we found that deserves more prominence, because it is, in many respects, the challenge of data management is how to integrate our environments.
Right. Mike, Frederick, if I may.
Frederick, go ahead.
Yes. I just want to make sure, to mention that as a part of the DTCC effort, there is a major feedback and the review process that the DTCC went through and is providing back to the EDM Council, which is luckily now at the stage before the model really is formal and out and can be incorporated in the first version.
And I wanted to just to also point out that we're getting a lot of formal responses from our membership who have some experience with us, who are taking the time to document what they're learning, what needs to be added, and what they'd like to see enhanced. And we encourage everybody who has some experience with that to do that however formally or informally they like.
Can I interrupt?
You may, Carol. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to let you know that Christina Wong now has got audio and has a question. Irina Zadonsky also has a question. And it looks like there are a couple of other questions that are coming through as well. So
yeah, let's take those questions. So Christina, you've been patient, and thank you. You're up.
So this is actually Avi in a room with Christina. 2 comments and observations and 1 question. The first is I would really love to see at some point in the future some case studies adapted and published from many of these early adopters, so that again we can have some of these shared experiences to go around. The second question is, the financial data space, I think is, a little bit different than the software space, than the widget space, in the sense that many of us are both consumers as well as data suppliers to many other folks in the industry, right? So we're all consuming and redistributing each other's data for our own processes. Is there any sense to take, or any plan to take more of the macro approach, go up and, instead of looking at each individual firm and each individual entity, to say, hey, you know what, moving through the supply chain, we want to add the value and say, if A is feeding data to B, we've completed that chain, right? We know that these folks have this data quality plan in place. We have a matching data quality plan in place to ensure that we don't keep on getting sucked into this point of the weakest link in the chain.
Well, I think that is the objective. I'm not sure that that's a component of the assessment model. I think that's an outcome of having one in place, that you can do better supply chain management and better relationships between suppliers, vendors, and those you report to.
But okay. I would add, Mike, that the interoperability as a topic incorporates some of what Avi's talking about, I think, and we all have those concerns about, we're not just have our concerns about the data that we're getting from somebody else, but the ramifications of sending bad data on a trade, or and having a trade break, and what's involved in that, and so there are consequences that we need to consider within the realm of interoperability that at some level probably will touch upon what Avi's talking about, but probably not fully embrace it, because that would be a full industry evaluation, I guess.
Sure, Avi, let me let you finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, and as a follow-up point to that, I'm guessing most of the folks on this line here, right, we have an appreciation for the complexity, for the richness, for the multidimensionality of the data. But many times when we're dealing with our IT partners as part of a formal SDLC, that can get lost and flattened for the need of, whatever the technical processes might be. I haven't had a chance to really look through the book that I have in front of me, but I'm wondering how much you work to overlap or to integrate really these data processes into the SDLC or into an SDLC model out there, if there's any planned work or working groups for the future to get involved with.
That was the intent, Melody. You've been our life cycle expert.
Yes,
what do you think?
With the EDMC Carnegie Mellon partnership, we have a perfect opportunity to do that. And many of us, including myself, have integrated those processes in the past with the SDLC. One of the data management improvements to the SDLC is a continuous thread similar to security of data quality throughout the life cycle. So what that allows you to do is anchor the data quality considerations, let's say, of a software development or consolidation or new project from the time of project initiation. Ensure that data quality is represented through requirements, that it is traceable through design and implementation with the selected tool sets and processes. So I think that is where it all comes together in the implemented data layer.
Carol, you had another question in the queue?
Yes, we'll next go to Irina Zadonsky. Then I have a question from Brendan Clark. I also have a question, Dick Wilson, or a comment from Dick, and I think John Mulholland most probably has something as well.
Just go ahead and manage the queue. We'll just go right through these questions. So Irina,
please.
Hey, Carol, I got a note from Irina that her phone audio isn't working. She wanted me to read the question. Her question is, her comment, I had a question related to what the previous speaker was talking about, where MM and MDM come in this model, and why are they not featured prominently, particularly in complex, heterogeneous environments?
I think that this is Melanie. I think that is one of the areas that requires enhancement in the model. Master data management is such a key, not only for the target data architecture, but also for grounding and anchoring and expanding data management. We are actually right now working with a master data management vendor to develop another process, which can end up in the DMM. And metadata management, Mike is leading.
Hello?
Incorporated into the DMM and is an ongoing objective of the council. Carol, next person in queue.
Dick Wilson, you have a comment?
No, whoever the next person is.
Dick, can you be heard?
Oh, okay, yes. Oh, yes. A couple of things. One, with respect to expanding the data management maturity to the supply chain, we're starting to do that by requiring that our vendors comply with the standards that we put in place for data management practices with respect to service level agreements, metadata for their data content, and a lot of the policies and standards that we put in practice. We expect our vendors to comply. In the long run, it will be great for maturity across the entire financial system for all of us to agree on how that should work and what really is the standard practice.
That kind of brings in, Dick, before you go on, that kind of brings in the kind of the oversight regulatory process component as well, right? We're talking about understanding the data manufacturing process, managing the supply chain, getting out of reconciliation and transformation as our way of operating, and having a lot more consistency in the underlying data that feeds all of our processes. So, thank you for that.
For us to do it, it's like California telling car manufacturers that they have to do a certain percentage of, electric cars. There's not a general policy about that.
But it's a good start.
Yeah. The other aspect which we saw, and this is an answer to the question about MDM, as being part of the model. And it also applies to the idea of data integration. I think that we need to ensure that the model clearly articulates the fundamental core or primitive data management practices. Those get combined in different proportions and configurations to create something that would be more composite or complex. Master data management is made up of a lot of different things. And the same thing about data integration. It includes concerns about reference data management, data modeling, governance, data movement controls, data enhancement activities, data quality. And when you start saying, how good are you at master data management or data integration, nobody really knows what you're talking about. If you get the model down to a level where you can talk about, well, here's where your master data management didn't work. It's because you didn't have a clear system of record for your data. Then you can really help people in understanding where they should go and what their actual maturity level is in different areas.
So to translate this down into the practical reality of data management, root cause activities and things that really make sense from how you improve your practice.
Yes, it's the effective decomposition of data management concerns into areas that work together to create more complex solutions.
Okay, I'm sorry, Carol, was there somebody else with a question?
I have a question from Brendan. He hasn't got audio. Have participant firms been candid in assessing their own maturity levels? For example, every child will tell you they are almost grown up.
Oh, yeah, very good question. So, Ron, let me pick on you. Do people lie in these meetings?
Is John still on the phone? Since John's attended more than I have.
Yes, I am, and I will say that no, people don't. People are very honest.
Yeah, I can echo that. I mean, my own.
Yeah, Predrag, your experiences with that as well. People
yes,
are candid in their reality. So
very candid.
A follow-up to that is, how do you deal with, if you have multiple business units and there are various levels of maturity, how do you deal with a composite view and get those, you're always worried about not being a report card and not being a comparison of one business unit against another. Did that come up, and if so, how did you address it?
Well, the issue
on. Oh, go ahead, Predrag.
Yeah, the issue there is that you are dealing with the different levels, if you will, right? So if we are talking about the business units, you would have the recognition of those business units that have some of the process areas established at some levels through the level 2 recognition or rating. And then on the level 3, that's going to be a problem, and then you will point by recommendations, which are the business units or the functions within the firm that have to step up and what they need to do, with that.
Mm-hmm. Mike, let me just add to what Predrag just said, in that most people, even if they're underperforming relative to their brethren in some of these areas, understand that, and they're looking for help. And they're looking to understand what processes, why they're underperforming, and get rid of some of the obstacles. So I think what we have mostly seen here is that people understand the bigger mission. They know that this is not a finger pointing exercise, and what this is about is really just helping them do their jobs better. I think that's why people generally, as they said. They're telling the truth, and they don't get caught up in necessarily the politics in these discussions, because they really are looking to solve the problem that's in front of them, even if they're underperforming.
Well, that's a welcome relief from some of the previous observations of the biggest enemy is not across the street but down the hall. And if that has changed from a data management perspective, that's a huge step forward, in my opinion.
Mike, this is Sheila Jeffrey at Bank of America.
Hi,
and I just wanted to add that we have been privileged to have a robust data steward executive program get started in our line of businesses, which to some of the earlier conversation we found to be a very beneficial driver to help promote the use of just data management practices in general. But I think we've also seen a desire for something like the DMM that can be used to help our executives demonstrate engagement, and more importantly, perhaps for their political and organizational value, show progress in the data management space. So I think we do need to remember that there is a need for that type of tooling, and that there are drivers for being able to demonstrate healthy and constructive and progressive engagement in data management.
Perfect.
So I think that's an aspect of the use of the DMM that we need to ensure is also available.
So let's build off of that for our final minute or two. You know, for those that are thinking about assessments or the DMM usage, what advice do you have for them to help them maximize the potential of this process? Let me start with you, Melanie, if I may.
Maximize the potential of the appraisal process?
Yeah. What advice can we offer those that are thinking about doing this in order to be able to, you know, get the most bang for their buck, if you will?
Take a big tent approach. Have the view in mind that this is essentially a strategic initiative, even though it will result in many, many, many helpful and quickly realizable tactical gains, and involve all the stakeholders as much as possible, because once you get to level 3 across the model, there needs to be institutionalization, well-defined roles and responsibilities, well-defined governance, and essentially through this focus on data, you are helping your organizations function better together.
So as appropriate, Melanie, you're going to have the last word on this. It's now 12:30. I wanted to thank you, all of the panelists for their candor and for their willingness to appreciate. I will close by saying we are very interested in interacting with our members on this process, on the DMM, and on the things associated with it. Jim Halcomb is in place to work with you. The best way of doing that probably is to send Jim an email. He will get back to you and talk to you about what we're doing and how we can work with you to support your objectives. So Jim Halcomb is J Halcomb, Halcomb, at edmcouncil.org. He's the person to start with, and will get you engaged in the process. So with that, once again, thank you all very much for participating and for your attention, and we'll call this meeting adjourned.